Indeed, as our world seems to spin ever faster, our journeying may pause to quieten our minds. In T.S. Eliot's words, at the still point of the turning world, and allow ourselves to renew. In this, with the great diversity of our communities, we can find the strength to ensure that right triumphs over wrong.
A palace statement just destroyed Prince Harry's entire world in seconds. DNA tests revealed a truth so shocking that Harry collapsed and was rushed to hospital in a complete breakdown. What they discovered about Archie's real father will leave you absolutely speechless.
Yeah, I think stuff to do with family overwhelms me quite a bit. You know, worry or stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit. But in terms of, you know, doing the job and things like that, I don't feel too overwhelmed by that. Not now anyway. When I was younger, yeah, there are bits that overwhelm you, a bit like, whoa, are we actually doing this? Is this sort of happening?
The 9 sentences that ended everything. The fertility clinic scandal they desperately tried to hide. And the one bombshell question nobody saw coming. Did Meghan deceive Harry all along, or is he hiding the truth? The statement had undergone extensive review by constitutional lawyers and legal experts before receiving approval at the highest levels of the British government. Every single word had been chosen with extreme precision, yet the message it delivered was nothing short of explosive. According to the palace, comprehensive DNA analysis had conclusively determined that Prince Harry was not the biological father of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, the child born on May 6, 2019. The announcement provided specific details about how the genetic testing had been conducted. Samples had been obtained through proper legal channels with full court authorization. 3 separate accredited laboratories had performed independent analysis to ensure accuracy beyond any reasonable doubt. Palace sources confirmed that all results were consistent and showed no biological relationship between the Duke of Sussex and the child known as Archie. The implications reached far beyond a simple family matter. This revelation struck at the very heart of the constitutional framework of the British monarchy itself. What made the statement particularly devastating was its discussion of succession rights. Archie had been officially included in the line of succession to the British throne based on the assumption that he was Prince Harry's biological son. Under British succession law, inclusion in the line requires proven descent from the qualifying royal bloodline. The palace statement made absolutely clear that Archie did not meet this requirement, and therefore his position in the succession was void. The final portion of the statement indicated that investigations were still ongoing. Questions about who knew what information, when they knew it, and whether fraudulent claims had been made regarding succession rights were all under active examination by appropriate authorities. The palace promised further statements as the investigation progressed, leaving the door open for even more revelations to come. The reaction across the globe was immediate and overwhelming. Within 10 minutes, every major news organization had interrupted their regular programming to report the story. Within 20 minutes, social media platforms were flooded with discussions about the paternity revelation, with related terms trending worldwide. Constitutional experts were rushed onto television programs to explain the unprecedented nature of what had just occurred. No one in living memory could recall a situation quite like this one. But perhaps the most significant reaction was happening thousands of miles away in Montecito, California. It was 10:23 in the evening on December 1st when Harry's phone began exploding with notifications. Security advisors, lawyers, and family contacts were all trying to reach him urgently. According to multiple sources who spoke with media outlets in the days that followed, Harry had been preparing for bed when the messages started flooding in. When Harry opened the palace statement on his phone, witnesses reported that the color drained completely from his face. His initial reaction, according to sources close to the situation, was to assume this must be a hack or some kind of cruel hoax designed to humiliate him. He immediately called his legal representatives in the United Kingdom, demanding confirmation about whether the palace had actually released such a statement. When his lawyers confirmed it was genuine and that Buckingham Palace was officially declaring he was not Archie's biological father, Harry reportedly said only that it was impossible and insane. Within minutes, as the full weight of the announcement began to settle over him, something shifted. multiple witnesses described Harry becoming increasingly disoriented. His breathing became rapid and shallow. His speech grew confused and fragmented. Meghan apparently tried to calm him down, but her attempts only seemed to make things worse. When she tried to explain that there were reasons and complexities he did not understand, Harry looked at her with an expression that those present would later describe as complete and utter devastation. The medical emergency occurred around 1100 o'clock Pacific time. Harry collapsed in what followed was later determined to be a combination of hyperventilation, a shock-induced panic attack, and an emotional breakdown so severe that Meghan felt she had no choice but to call emergency services. Paramedics arrived at the Sussex residence within 12 minutes. They treated Harry at the scene before determining that he required hospital evaluation for potential cardiac symptoms and what they described as a psychological crisis. The scene at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, as described by staff members who later leaked information despite confidentiality requirements, was heartbreaking. Harry, the prince who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and who had always seemed so strong and protective of his family, was essentially catatonic. He appeared unable to process what he had learned. Medical professionals treating him reported that he kept repeating variations of the same phrase over and over. "I am his father. I know I am his father." It was as though he believed that saying it enough times could somehow make it true. Meghan arrived at the hospital shortly after the ambulance, and her demeanour struck many observers as unusual given the circumstances. According to those who witnessed her arrival, she appeared to be in crisis management mode rather than experiencing emotional devastation. She was constantly on her phone, coordinating with lawyers, with public relations advisors, and with contacts back in the United Kingdom. Her focus seemed to be primarily on controlling the narrative and managing the flow of information rather than on Harry's medical condition. Meanwhile, back in the United Kingdom, members of the royal family were processing the announcement and its aftermath in their own ways. Prince William had been informed of the palace statement 30 minutes before its public release, following standard protocol given his position as heir to the throne. His reaction, according to sources present during the briefing, was complicated. There was a sense of vindication that his long-held suspicions about certain Sussex claims had been proven correct. But there was also genuine distress for his brother, an understanding that Harry was facing not just public humiliation, but potentially the destruction of his entire understanding of his own family. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had reportedly been the one to ask the question that everyone was thinking. Does Harry actually know about this, or is he finding out at the same time as the rest of the world? The answer, confirmed through official channels, was that Harry had not been informed in advance. The palace had made a calculated decision to release the statement without warning Harry first. The reasoning was specific and strategic. Advance notice would have given the Sussexes an opportunity to craft a preemptive narrative or potentially flee jurisdiction before legal proceedings could be initiated. Princess Anne's reaction was characteristically pragmatic when she was briefed on the situation and Harry's subsequent collapse. She stated firmly that this was a constitutional necessity, not simply a family matter. If the child was not biologically descended from the qualifying royal line, he could not remain in the succession. Personal feelings, as difficult as they might be, were irrelevant to legal reality. King Charles, upon being informed of Harry's hospitalization shortly after the statement's release, was reportedly torn between his duties as a father and his responsibilities as monarch. He wanted to call Harry directly to express concern, but palace advisors strongly counselled against it until the legal situation could be clarified. Any communication between Charles and Harry could potentially be subpoenaed in fraud investigations. Expressing sympathy might be interpreted as the king acknowledging uncertainty about the palace's legal position. By dawn in the United Kingdom, the story had consumed every news cycle around the world. Medical experts were explaining how DNA testing was conducted and verified. Legal scholars were analysing the implications for succession law. Royal commentators were connecting dots that perhaps should have been connected years earlier, noting patterns in how Archie's birth had been handled that now made devastating sense in light of the paternity revelation. The investigation that ultimately led to the palace's devastating announcement had not begun with suspicions about paternity at all. Rather, it started with what seemed like a routine administrative matter that gradually uncovered evidence too significant to ignore. understanding how Buckingham Palace arrived at the decision to publicly question Archie's paternity requires examining an investigative timeline that stretched back nearly 8 months before the bombshell statement was released. The catalyst for everything that followed was a seemingly mundane legal review that commenced in April of 2025. Palace officials had initiated a broader effort to ensure that all succession-related documentation was properly maintained and legally defensible. This type of review was standard procedure, part of the ongoing administrative work that keeps the machinery of monarchy functioning smoothly. During this routine, examination legal clerks noticed certain irregularities in the documentation surrounding Archie's birth. The birth certificate itself was legally valid, but it contained details that appeared inconsistent with standard procedures. These were small things initially, the kinds of minor discrepancies that might be dismissed as clerical errors under normal circumstances. However, they were significant enough that senior legal advisors felt they warranted closer examination. When those advisors began digging deeper into the records, they discovered something surprising. The hospital listed on Archie's birth certificate was Portland Hospital in London. Yet that facility had no record of Meghan being admitted for delivery on any of the dates surrounding Archie's birth. Hospital administrators responding to properly authorized legal inquiries confirmed that while they had been told to expect a royal birth and had made preparations accordingly, Meghan had never actually been admitted as a patient. The birth certificate listed Portland Hospital as the place of birth, but the delivery had apparently occurred somewhere else entirely. This discovery raised immediate red flags among palace investigators. If the Sussexes had provided inaccurate information about something as fundamental as where their child was born, what other details might be questionable? The discovery triggered an expanded investigation. Palace investigators began working with private security firms that specialized in discreet inquiries. These professionals started piecing together a detailed timeline of Archie's conception and birth, looking for any other inconsistencies or irregularities in the official narrative that had been presented to the public and to the palace itself. The breakthrough in the investigation came in June when an anonymous tip was received through a secure legal channel. The person providing the tip claimed to be a former employee at a Los Angeles fertility clinic. According to this individual, Meghan and Harry had used donor sperm for in vitro fertilization procedures that resulted in Archie's conception. The tip was not vague or general. It included specific dates, clinic names, and enough verifiable detail that palace legal advisors determined it required serious investigation rather than dismissal as conspiracy theory or malicious gossip. Private investigators hired by palace lawyers began tracing the fertility clinic records mentioned in the tip. Using legal authority granted through British courts, which have jurisdiction over succession matters, they obtained records showing that Meghan had indeed been a patient at the specified clinic during the time frame when Archie would have been conceived. The records revealed multiple in vitro fertilization cycles, several embryo transfers, and most significantly, documentation indicating the use of donor sperm. The donor's identity was protected under California privacy laws and clinic policy, so investigators could not immediately determine who the biological father was. However, the records made abundantly clear that the genetic material used to create the embryo that became Archie had not come from Prince Harry. Medical records showed that Harry had provided samples for testing at the clinic, but those samples had not been used in the successful embryo creation. Instead, an anonymous donor's sperm had been combined with Meghan's egg to create the pregnancy that resulted in Archie's birth. The question that immediately consumed investigators was whether Harry had known about this arrangement. The clinic records proved somewhat ambiguous on this critical point. The documents showed consent forms signed by both Harry and Meghan for in vitro fertilization procedures generally. However, the specific consent form for donor sperm usage showed only Meghan's signature. This could mean several things. Perhaps Harry had not been present when that particular decision was made. Perhaps he had been aware of the decision but had chosen not to sign the documentation himself for reasons that were unclear. Or perhaps he had never been informed that donor sperm would be used at all. Additional investigation revealed that Meghan and Harry had been dealing with fertility challenges that had never been publicly disclosed. Medical records obtained through legal channels showed that Harry had significant sperm motility issues that made natural conception unlikely and substantially reduced the success rate of in vitro fertilization using his genetic material. The couple had apparently undergone several failed attempts at conception using Harry's sperm before the decision was made to use a donor instead. Princess Anne was brought into the investigation in July, once the donor sperm evidence had been confirmed through multiple sources. As one of the most senior working members of the royal family and someone with a well-established reputation for unflinching assessment of difficult situations, Anne was asked to review the evidence that had been gathered and advise palace officials on how to proceed. Her response was immediate and unequivocal. If the child was not biologically Harry's son, then the public had been deceived about succession matters. The palace needed definitive DNA confirmation, and it needed to be obtained through legal channels that would withstand any possible challenge in court. The authorization for DNA testing required extensive legal maneuvering. British courts had clear authority over succession matters as these fell under constitutional law. However, obtaining biological samples from a child living in California and under his parents' custody presented both jurisdictional and practical challenges. Palace lawyers worked closely with United States legal authorities, eventually obtaining court orders that authorized DNA sample collection during Archie's required medical appointments. The actual sample collection occurred in August at a California pediatric facility during what Archie's parents believed was a routine wellness checkup. Medical staff operating under court seal and specific legal authorization collected cheek swabs from the child. These samples were then sent to 3 separate accredited DNA laboratories for independent analysis. 2 of the laboratories were located in the United States, while the 3rd was in Switzerland. All 3 operated under strict chain of custody protocols designed to make the results defensible in any legal proceeding that might follow. The results came back in September, and they were both unanimous and unambiguous. The genetic markers analyzed by all 3 laboratories showed no biological relationship whatsoever between Prince Harry and Archie Mountbatten-Windsor. The child who had been presented to the world as 6th in line to the British throne had no genetic connection to the royal family at all. King Charles was formally informed of the DNA results on September the 23rd during a meeting that those present later described as one of the most difficult of his entire reign. Senior advisors presented him with the DNA results from all 3 laboratories, the fertility clinic records that had been obtained, and a comprehensive timeline of the investigation. Charles's first response was to question whether there could be any possibility of error, any chance that the results were somehow wrong. When he was assured that 3 independent laboratories using samples with verified chains of custody had all reached identical conclusions, Charles asked the question that would define his moral struggle throughout the crisis. Does Harry actually know about this? The answer, based on all available evidence gathered during the investigation, appeared to be that Harry probably did not know, at least not with certainty. The fertility clinic records suggested that Meghan might have made the donor decision independently, possibly during one of the many medical appointments that Harry had not attended. Whether she had told him afterward, whether he had suspected something but not pursued the truth, or whether he had been kept completely in the dark remained unclear. However, the preponderance of evidence suggested that Harry was more likely a victim of deception than a willing participant in fraud. Prince William was briefed on the findings in early October, and his reaction combined vindication with genuine sadness for his brother's situation. William had long suspected that the Sussexes were not being entirely truthful about various aspects of their lives and their departure from royal duties. However, discovering that Harry might not be Archie's biological father was more dramatic and more serious than even William's skepticism had anticipated. During the briefing, William reportedly stated that if Meghan had done this without Harry's knowledge, then she had perpetrated perhaps the cruelest deception imaginable. And if Harry had known and participated in the deception, then he had committed fraud against the crown itself. Either way, William observed, the situation was absolutely catastrophic. The decision to make the information public rather than handling the matter privately within the family was made in November after extensive legal and constitutional consultation. The palace's legal advisors determined that because Archie had been officially included in the line of succession, the deception affected constitutional matters of genuine public interest. Handling such a significant matter privately would essentially mean concealing information that citizens had a legitimate right to know, particularly given ongoing public debates about royal funding, transparency, and the relevance of monarchy in modern society. The detailed medical and legal records that emerged in the days following the palace announcement painted a complex picture of fertility struggles, difficult decisions, and what appeared to be a potentially catastrophic deception that transformed the Sussex story from royal drama into something far more troubling. Understanding what actually happened requires examining a timeline that began years before Archie's birth, during what should have been a hopeful period in Harry and Meghan's relationship. The timeline began in late 2017, shortly after Harry and Meghan's engagement was publicly announced. According to medical records that later became part of legal proceedings, Meghan had consulted with fertility specialists in London within just weeks of the engagement becoming official. She expressed concern about her age, as she was 36 at the time, and made clear her desire to conceive quickly once they were married. For many women, fertility becomes a more pressing concern in their mid to late 30s, and Meghan appeared acutely aware of the biological clock. Initial fertility assessments had been encouraging for Meghan. Medical evaluations showed that her egg quality and ovarian reserve were within normal ranges for someone of her age. There was no apparent reason why she would face significant difficulties conceiving. However, when Harry underwent testing, as is standard protocol for couples pursuing fertility evaluation, the results were concerning. Harry's sperm count was adequate, falling within acceptable ranges, but his motility rates were significantly below optimal levels. Motility refers to the ability of sperm to move efficiently, which is crucial for natural conception. The medical professionals who reviewed Harry's test results believe the issues were likely related to several factors from his past. His military service had exposed him to various environmental factors that can affect fertility. Additionally, there was the possible impact from his well-documented years of heavy drinking throughout his 20s, a period of his life that had been extensively covered by the British tabloid press. While Harry had cleaned up his lifestyle considerably by the time of his engagement, the long-term effects of that earlier period may have left their mark. The couple began trying to conceive naturally after their wedding in May of 2018. For several months, they attempted to start their family without medical intervention, as many couples do. However, by September of that year, Meghan was pushing for more aggressive intervention. Medical records show that she consulted with Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a prominent Los Angeles fertility specialist, during a trip to California. Dr. Rodriguez had recommended in vitro fertilization given Harry's test results and Meghan's age, suggesting that waiting for natural conception could waste precious time they did not have. The first in vitro fertilization cycle took place in November of 2018 at a private clinic in London. Using Harry's sperm and Meghan's eggs, medical professionals created 4 embryos, 2 of which were considered viable for transfer into Meghan's uterus. The first embryo transfer failed to result in pregnancy, a disappointment, but not unusual in fertility treatment. The second attempt in January of 2019 also failed. Medical notes from this period showed Meghan becoming increasingly frustrated and anxious, expressing deep concern that her advancing age was working against them and that time was running out. It was after the second failed cycle that the question of using donor sperm apparently first arose. Medical records showed that Dr. Rodriguez had discussed this option with Meghan during a consultation in February of 2019. The doctor's notes were clinical in nature, but revealing in what they documented. The notes indicated that the patient was expressing significant distress about the failed cycles and that they had discussed the option of donor sperm given the male partner's motility issues. According to the documentation, the patient had been very interested in this possibility, but was concerned about how her partner might respond to the suggestion. What happened next became the subject of intense speculation and legal scrutiny in the aftermath of the palace announcement. Clinic records showed that in late February of 2019, Meghan had signed consent forms for in vitro fertilization using donor sperm. The consent form included a designated line for a partner's signature, but that line remained blank. Standard clinic policy required partner consent for donor procedures, which made the blank signature line particularly significant. However, there appeared to be a notation on the form indicating that partner consent had been obtained verbally and that the partner was unavailable for signature due to travel commitments. Whether Harry had actually provided verbal consent, whether he had been fully informed of the decision at all, or whether the clinic had been misled about Harry's agreement became one of the central questions in analysing the entire situation. Legal experts who later examined the records noted that the documentation appeared suspiciously thin for such a significant decision. This suggested either irregularities in the clinic's procedures or a deliberate effort to obscure the true nature of the consent process. The donor himself had been selected from an anonymous sperm bank database. California law provided strong protections for donor anonymity, which meant his identity could not be officially disclosed. However, investigative journalists and legal authorities examining the case were able to trace certain general details about him. The donor profile showed someone of similar height and coloring to Harry, which suggested deliberate selection to ensure physical resemblance between the biological father and the man who would be raising the child. The donor's medical and educational background indicated high intelligence and good health. Crucially, however, the donor had no genetic connection whatsoever to British royalty or any relationship to Harry beyond superficial physical similarity. The in vitro fertilization cycle, using the donor's sperm, took place in March of 2019. 2 embryos were created from the combination of donor sperm and Meghan's eggs, and one of these embryos was transferred on March 23rd. The pregnancy was confirmed on April the 5th, and Meghan's visible pregnancy progression throughout the spring and early summer was entirely real. Whatever questions existed about the circumstances of conception, she had unquestionably carried and delivered Archie. The genetic material that created him simply had not come from her husband. The birth itself took place not at Portland Hospital, as the official birth certificate claimed, but at a private facility in Windsor, according to staff members who came forward after the palace announcement. The decision to list Portland Hospital on the official documentation had apparently been made to maintain consistency with public statements that had been issued prematurely before the Sussexes had actually finalized their birth plan. This discrepancy, seemingly minor at the time, would later become one of the first threads that investigators pulled in unraveling the larger deception. What made the entire situation particularly complex was the persistent question of when, if ever, Harry had been told the complete truth about Archie's conception. Some evidence suggested he might have known from the very beginning. His behavior during the pregnancy announcement and during Archie's first public appearances had been analysed extensively by body language experts after the scandal broke. These experts suggested that Harry had displayed high levels of stress and anxiety that could potentially indicate knowledge of a secret he was helping to conceal, though such analysis remained inherently speculative. Other evidence pointed in the opposite direction, suggesting Harry might have been kept entirely in the dark or given only partial information that allowed him to maintain what investigators called plausible deniability. Friends of Harry who spoke to media outlets on condition of anonymity described him as someone who desperately wanted to be a father, someone who might have been willing to overlook certain details or avoid asking difficult questions if it meant achieving that deeply personal goal. One friend stated that Harry had wanted a family so badly that if Meghan had told him they needed donor assistance and had framed it as a minor medical detail, he might have agreed without fully understanding or perhaps not wanting to know all the implications. The legal contracts surrounding the donor arrangement added yet another layer of complexity to an already complicated situation. Standard sperm donation agreements include specific clauses establishing that the donor relinquishes all parental rights and that the recipient becomes the legal parent of any resulting child. These contracts typically assume that the recipient is either the person who will carry and birth the child or is legally married to that person at the time of conception. In Harry and Meghan's case, the legal parentage was entirely clear under California family law. Both of them were Archie's legal parents regardless of genetic connection, assuming that proper consent procedures had been followed. However, British succession law operated under fundamentally different principles than California family law. Inclusion in the line of succession to the British throne required proven biological descent from the qualifying royal bloodline. Legal parentage established under California law or any other jurisdiction's family law could not override the constitutional requirements for succession in the United Kingdom. This created a situation where Archie could be legally Harry's son under American law, while simultaneously being ineligible for the British line of succession due to lack of biological connection to the royal family. The medical emergency that began with Harry's collapse at his Montecito home on the evening of December the 2nd revealed the devastating human cost of both the palace's calculated disclosure and the deception that had preceded it. Emergency room physicians at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital who treated Harry described encountering a patient in an acute psychological crisis unlike anything most of them had witnessed in their careers. Harry's initial presentation showed symptoms that were consistent with a severe panic attack, He exhibited rapid heart rate, significant hyperventilation, chest pain, and marked disorientation. Medical staff worked quickly to stabilize his physical symptoms, administering oxygen and monitoring his cardiac function. However, as they brought his vital signs under control, the psychological dimensions of his crisis became increasingly apparent and increasingly concerning to the treatment team. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the emergency physician who initially assessed Harry, later testified in legal proceedings about his mental state during those first critical hours. She described him as cycling between denial, rage, and complete emotional collapse. He would insist that the palace statement was a lie, then demand to know how they could possibly prove such a thing, then break down crying while asking how this could be happening to him. It was clear to medical professionals that he was processing information that had fundamentally altered his understanding of his own reality. The most heartbreaking aspect of Harry's breakdown, according to multiple hospital staff members who witnessed it, was his repeated insistence that he was Archie's father. He reportedly said over and over that he knew he was his father, that he had held him since birth, that he had raised him. The distinction between biological paternity and social fatherhood seemed to be something Harry could not process in his acute emotional state. For him, being a father meant the relationship he had built with Archie over the years, not simply a matter of genetic material. Meghan arrived at the hospital approximately 30 minutes after Harry had been brought in by ambulance. Her interaction with medical staff was notably different from Harry's emotional devastation. Multiple hospital employees later described her as composed, focused, and primarily concerned with controlling the flow of information rather than with Harry's emotional or physical state. She asked repeatedly about privacy protocols, about who had access to Harry's medical information, and about whether the media had been alerted to his hospitalization. When she was finally allowed to see Harry in his hospital room, witnesses reported a tense and uncomfortable interaction. Harry reportedly refused to look at her directly and turned his face away when she attempted to touch his hand. When she tried to explain that they needed to present a united front to the media and the public, Harry's response was reportedly harsh and filled with anger. He told her that he did not care about the media or public perception, that all he cared about was whether she had lied to him about something as fundamental as his own child's paternity. The strain on Harry and Meghan's marriage became immediately apparent to everyone in their orbit. Staff members at the Montecito home, speaking anonymously to various media outlets, described a couple who were barely speaking to each other. Harry reportedly spent most of his time in separate areas of the house, refusing meals that were prepared for him and declining to interact with either Archie or Lilibet. One staff member stated that Harry could not look at Archie without breaking down emotionally, and he could not look at Meghan without visible anger. The constitutional crisis that followed the announcement witnessed unprecedented debates in Parliament about succession law, genetic testing, and the role of monarchy in modern Britain. Emergency sessions were convened on December 4th to address the immediate questions. Could Archie remain in the line of succession if he was not biologically descended from the royal line? The answer from constitutional experts was unambiguous. British succession law was based on bloodline descent from Sophia of Hanover, as established by the Act of Settlement in 1701. Without biological descent from the qualifying royal bloodline, there was simply no legal basis for inclusion in the succession. Members of Parliament debated whether the palace had overstepped its authority by conducting DNA testing on a child without explicit parental consent. Some argued that succession matters were serious enough to justify such testing under existing constitutional law. Others contended that the rights of children, even royal children, should be protected, and that genetic testing without full parental knowledge set a dangerous precedent. The debates grew heated at times, with representatives from various political parties offering sharply different perspectives on where the balance should lie between constitutional necessity and individual privacy rights. The most serious legal implications involved potential fraud charges against Meghan. Specifically, multiple legal experts suggested that if she had deliberately concealed the use of donor sperm, particularly if she had misled Harry about it and had then presented Archie as biologically Harry's child for purposes of succession inclusion, she could potentially face criminal charges of fraud against the Crown. Such charges carried serious legal penalties and could theoretically result in extradition requests from the United Kingdom to United States authorities. American legal experts weighed in on whether such extradition would be possible or likely. The general consensus was that extradition for fraud charges related to royal succession would face significant hurdles in American courts. The United States does not recognize monarchy or hereditary titles in its own legal system, which could make it difficult to argue that fraud related to succession constituted a crime that American courts would consider extraditable. However, if the charges were framed as general fraud or misrepresentation rather than specifically succession-related offenses, the legal landscape became more complicated. Public reaction across the United Kingdom remained intensely divided as more details emerged. Polling conducted in the days following the announcement showed that approximately 40% of British citizens believed the palace had acted appropriately in revealing the paternity truth. About 35% believed the palace had overreached, suggesting that testing children without explicit parental consent was inappropriate regardless of succession implications. The remaining 25% were undecided or felt they needed more information before forming an opinion. Support for Harry personally ran considerably higher than support for his legal position, with many expressing genuine sympathy for Harry as a potential victim of deception. Social media was flooded with messages of support for the prince, with many people noting that he had already endured significant trauma in his life, including the loss of his mother at a young age, and that this new revelation seemed particularly cruel. The hashtag supporting Harry trended worldwide for several days, with millions of people expressing their solidarity with him. In contrast, public opinion regarding Meghan was far more negative. Many people felt that if the allegations were true and she had indeed concealed the use of donor sperm from Harry, then she had committed an unforgivable betrayal. Others urged caution, noting that the full facts of the situation were not yet known, and that rushing to judgment without complete information was unfair. Women's rights advocates pointed out that fertility decisions are often complex and deeply personal, and that judging Meghan harshly without understanding the full context of the choices she faced could be problematic. The identity of the biological donor became the subject of intense media speculation once the scandal broke into public view. Though California law prevented any official disclosure of his identity, several men came forward claiming to be Archie's biological father. Some appeared to be seeking attention or notoriety, while others seemed motivated by potential financial benefit. Without DNA verification, however, all of their claims remained unproven and largely dismissed by serious observers. The fertility clinic maintained an absolute refusal to disclose any donor information, citing both legal requirements and ethical obligations to protect donor privacy under all circumstances. Meanwhile, Harry remained largely out of public view in the weeks following his hospitalization. Sources close to him reported that he was receiving professional mental health support to help him process the trauma of the revelations. Friends described him as devastated, not just by the paternity question itself, but by the feeling that his entire understanding of his family and his marriage had been built on potentially false foundations. The question of whether his relationship with Meghan could survive such a fundamental breach of trust remained very much open. In the aftermath of everything that had happened, perhaps the cruelest truth was the simplest one. Secrets do not protect families from harm. They detonate families from within. Archie would spend his entire lifetime paying for decisions that were made before he was even born, caught between two countries, two legal systems, and a family torn apart by revelations that no one could have predicted would unfold in quite such a devastating way.